I am Tiffany. I use she, her pronouns. And actually, when I started at Puppet, I was not a sysadmin. I sometimes joke that if you work there long enough, you'll just become one. I was actually a scheduler for the consultants and automated myself into boredom, and then my manager was like, well, do you want to implement some software? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't know I was supposed to say no, so I said yes. And I learned some really hard lessons. They left me deeply emotionally scarred, and so I read up on this stuff, and I am here giving this talk today so that hopefully you can avoid having, at least, hopefully you can have different emotional scars, because we do work in tech. And change is constant. You roll out a thing, hopefully you get to iterate on it at least once or twice, but then all too soon the business pivots onto something else. You got to rip it out and start all over again. Now, when this goes well, it is so validating, right? Who's had a tool or a process they rolled out go and improve people's lives? That's why we're here, right? It feels so good. Now, who's done that and it didn't go well, or had it done to them? Yeah, when it goes bad, it is the worst. The people rolling out the change have no idea why these other people are resisting the change. The people resisting the change don't know what's the friggin' point. Everything's working fine anyway, and so they just keep doing the thing they were doing, and then you end up with subverted processes and some shadow IT, which means that the original thing you were solving doesn't get solved, and then 6 to 18 months later, here we are again trying to solve the exact same problem, only now we're all just exhausted and emotional and tired. Okay, so just as we're a bunch of computer nerds, there are nerds that like to study change management, and they have several different frameworks for predicting the success or failure of a change. The one I'm going to use for this talk is called ADKAR. It is an acronym for these words. Quick summary. In order for people to adopt a change, they need to be aware that there even is a problem, care enough about fixing the problem, and that all has to happen before you can give them the knowledge on what they need to do. They do need to be able to do it, and we need to be reminded because we're human. To be clear, this is not a talk on ITIL, and this is not a talk on how to shove a terrible change down someone's throat. We have not yet reached the dystopia where you can just force push directly into someone's brain. This talk is about how to write an argument so that it will compile in people's brains and run on their meatware. Okay, cool. So that being said, the most important part of a change is doing the right one. So my favorite part of changes is the stakeholder interviews. Because we all have our own individual view of the world and the way that we work within the systems in our team or our community, right? And so we are obviously painfully aware of the thing that we're trying to fix most of the time, and therefore we often have an idea of what we want to do to fix that problem. But we don't yet have the full scope of what the problem is or what other people think the problem is. And what other people think is the problem is equally, if not more so, important. So you need to have stakeholder interviews. Think of who will be impacted by this change. Who are the users? Is it a different team? Is it a different customer? What types of customers or teams are going to be impacted? And you want to have interviews with a representative sample of each of these. That first tool that I got to implement, okay, so the problem scope was that sales, support, and our consultants all use different tools to track data. Sales sold stuff to customers and put all their notes in Salesforce. A consultant would go on site and they might write some custom modules or whatever. They'll take notes on the specific things that they did at the customer. And then support would get tickets and put that into yet a third system. None of these talked, which meant that there was a lot of information being lost between each of these teams. It really was prone to error. So I got to have interviews with some support folks, some sales folks, and the consultants. and ask them, what are the problems that you see in this space? Because of these tools not talking, what impacts you? What this does is it raises your awareness of what their awareness of the problem is, and what are the things that keep them up at night? What do they desire? So don't plant in their head the solution you're going to be doing. You're going to basically just see what you're asking to see rather than uncovering new and useful information. So just ask open-ended questions about the problem space and write it all down, even if it's completely pie-in-the-sky stuff. No, this tool is not going to wash our dishes. It would be cool, yes, I agree, but no. But yeah, let's just write it down and then ask them to sort by importance. What are the things, if we could fix this one thing for you, would make this entire project worth the pain of changing what you're doing right now? What are the things that, like, it would be nice, but, like, no biggie, just a small little, 5 minutes a week doesn't drain your will to live. Okay. Don't preach your solution, because then they're going to be bored and they're going to check out and they're not going to have any ownership. And do not make promises. This is not a requirements gathering session. You are literally figuring out what the problem space is, and you haven't talked to everyone yet. So maybe two people have incompatible desires. Implementing one fix is going to break the workflow for another person, because that's your job to go back and figure out which one has the most important business case. Okay, so if at all possible, any change that you embark on should be fallible. If people have competing needs and interests, and your solution is not going to be able to make a net gain for your group, you are going to have a hard time getting them to adopt it. Why are you wasting your time rolling out a bad change? It's really hard to get arguments to tell your managers, like, sorry dude, this isn't going to work, but it can be done. Yeah. So after you've done your first stakeholder interviews and you have come up with a good fix that's going to actually improve the lives of the people that you're working for, then before you launch it, follow back up with them. Tell them about all the great things that you're going to do, but also tell them about the things that you're not going to be able to do. What's going to be excluded? When you are upfront about this, you can build evangelists as opposed to enemies. And what you need to do there is give them the reasoning behind, I know you said that you really wanted this one solution, but it turns out that this other team needed something different, and their need was greater. Here's why, here's how we evaluated it. Maybe they'll show you maybe they'll be able to correct you in how easy it is to fix both problems at the same time. But when they understand the reasoning behind the decisions you had to make, when you do roll out and the rest of their teammates are like, oh, rabble, they broke our dashboard, they can be like, yeah, but sales, I mean, it's not your problem, it's somebody else's problem. They're like, okay, this is probably fine. So yeah, get yourself an evangelist. Give credit. So remember when I said don't preach your idea? Even if you were going to do the thing they were asking for in the first place, this is like the IKEA syndrome. They get to have ownership and be like, yeah, I told them to put that feature in or to do this thing. And so people are more likely to adopt a change if they feel ownership over it. They're going to really, really appreciate that cardboard table. Seek consensus. Ask them, here's what we're going to launch. Is this going to be okay? They'll tell you up front if it's going to be an uphill battle and how steep that hill's going to be. And also, look out for new stakeholders. So that original piece of software I was launching, you'll remember it touched sales and support and our consultants. The tool that the consultants were using was this super, super ancient, slow wiki that took multiple seconds for pages to load. Everybody hated it, but the whole company used it. And so in my head, I'm like, oh, we're just going to replace this slow wiki that everybody despises. Instant win. Piece of cake. But I didn't go in and talk to HR or engineering or anybody else in the company. And so I didn't collect their needs. My solution replaced that wiki, and therefore the scope of who was impacted increased. And because I didn't go back and talk to them, it ended up getting shut down before it could even launch. And deep emotional scars, crying at night, whatever, don't end up with those scars. Okay, so you have talked to all of your stakeholders. You have built a good, useful solution. You have run that solution by those stakeholders. It is time to launch. Start with the tigers. What are the absolutely terrible, terrifying, awful things that are going to happen if we do not do this change? You are really going for an emotional impact here. I know we are in computers because people are terrifying and we don't like emotions, but that's how you get an argument to compile for a human brain. You need to start with something visceral. If you give them just specific directions about you need to unzip your sleeping bag and apply your shoes and then unzip your tent and then exit and head in a northwesterly direction to escape the tiger that has entered the camp, they're already halfway in the jaws of the beast. Wake them up. Charts are really nice, but they do not have an emotional impact unless they're really, really red or something. Try and make your argument visceral. For example, if you are wasting tons and tons of money by a really inefficient testing suite or some sort, maybe you can figure out how many Teslas you are wasting per year, and then get a pile of Hot Wheels and put it on their table and be like, this is what that number means. Something that they can tie that's not just going to get lost in all of the numbers and bits of data that they are constantly looking at. You can also point to recent pain. I can say, hey, support, you remember when you spent 2 full days debugging this customer issue because you weren't able to quickly check if they had a custom module installed? That sucked. That is a really good emotional argument. Use it. Future threats, competitor coming for your lunch, or GDPR is also a good change in compliance. You don't want to get in trouble with that. That's terrifying. No. And then my personal favorite is misalignment with self-identity. Raise your hand if you aim to be a hypocrite. Raise your hand if it causes your stomach to do weird things when you think about someone calling you a hypocrite. That is a really, really good argument. If I can go and say, hey, we're an automation company. Why is it that we have to click into 3 separate tools to look at this? We're not who we say we are if we let this fly. We need to change and be who we want to be. It's I don't know, it sounds like Pullman in 4th of July or something, right? You want to, defeat the aliens. Sorry, that's not a good line. Okay, cool. All right, you've pointed out the terrifying tigers. Similarly, we need to identify what glorious puppies and kittens await us in our new future. Again, you really want to make it personal to them. As much as I wish that people care deeply about data quality, they don't. What they care about is being able to go home on time, not stressed out because they didn't have to stay late redoing a project because they couldn't deliver on time because the first time they tried it didn't work because the data quality was bad. Don't tell them data quality is your goal. Tell them going home on time is the goal. All right. So easier work, less work, or the work that you are doing is far more interesting. These are really good puppies. Continued employment is not about do it or else I fire you. It's more do it and we can still stay competitive in the market and we won't fold. This really only works if you like your coworkers and your job. All of these are audience specific, so you'll need to do your interviews to figure out what is meaningful to the people that are impacted by your change. The greater good, so maybe it's a green initiative, or maybe it's something that'll improve your community that you're working with. And then again, that self-identity. The tool that I was rolling out was basically if like Wikipedia and Facebook had a baby that wore a tie, it was that. And so not only could I say, like, if we don't automate our problems, we're liars, I could also be like, but we're fun people. And now we can have, like, a place to talk about Magic the Gathering tournaments or karaoke parties or, like, that kind of stuff. Like, more, who are we? How can we be more of the selves that we want to be? Okay. Knowledge. How to do the change. The most important part of this step is that it is in the middle. It is not in the beginning. It is not even second. Who here has been at a company where somebody comes in and they're like, all right, so we have added a drop down in Jira so that you can document the origin of this found bug, whether it came from a customer or whether it was caught in CI or other. And then at the end of 6 months, we will have metrics that we can do something with. And then like 6 months later, nobody even remembers what that drop down is, much less has used it to create those dashboards. Has anyone had that happen or seen that happen? Who's had it happen to them? Yeah. That's because you started with the knowledge. You didn't paint the picture of what is terrible and what is to be gained. Never, ever start with the details. People will get bored or they will panic, and both of them are terrible ways to get people to pay attention. We're often very good at writing docs. Like, that's what we've grown up on. A lot of us that have gotten here like to read the flippin' manual. But there are lots of different learning styles. And some people don't learn very well from reading. So when you're doing the knowledge step, try and take into account different learning preferences. Like most people can read, but a lot of people learn better through other ways as well. And by having more varied instructional materials, you're able to bring in a lot more people who want to use your tool. And I'm not saying you have to come up with a billion different specific ways of presenting your information. One of my favorite ones, oh look, for you visual people, one of my favorite ways to launch a new tool or process is to have a class and walk through the docs that I've written and have people click through on the thing that they're doing, and I'm recording this. So what this does is the people who learn best in a group are surrounded by other people. The people who learn best by reading don't have to attend. The docs are already there, or they can read along. They can listen and hear, and if they learn best on their own without all those other weird eyeballs on them, then they can just watch the recording, and still all of those different learning styles get what they need. So yeah, do that. All right, ability. Ability is, one, are the managers going to let you do this thing? That's ability. But what it really means is, do the people believe that they can do it? What you want to do is you want to have a good example of someone who has already succeeded with your tool, or a team who's already implemented the change that you're looking for. You want to be able to point to someone that they know that they can be like and say, I want you to be like Mike. You want to walk through the logic of each of the steps that you're making in as much detail as you can, because the more detail you've got, this more someone can envision themselves stepping through each of those processes. And the stickier it is, the more likely they are to remember it. Now, that being said, the easiest things to remember are the simplest. In change management parlance, this is often called clearing the path. Every little bit of friction that a new user comes across is a barrier to their success, and it will freak them out, and they're not going to like doing the thing that you told them to do. a lot of us are here because we love the fiddly bits. Like, what are the knobs? What are the flags? How do I pass? What kinds of arguments can I even pass? Like, we like that stuff, but we really only like it for our stuff. How would you like having to pass flags to, like, do bank account stuff? Like, even the nerdiest of us get tired and lazy, and we only want to work on our stuff. So smooth it out as much as humanly possible. Give them a success story, clear the path, make sure management allows it, and subvert imposter syndrome. Another tool that I rolled out was an HR tool for the whole company. And the reason we chose it was because it was so simple for an end user to just walk in and update their data. Like, they didn't have to read a doc. They could just intuit it by looking at the menus that were available. They're like, oops, I totally did the thing I meant to do. Now my direct deposit's updated. The end. Except for this one thing. The time management thing. If you were an hourly employee and you put in your hours, it looked like it was from 1996, but it still worked the way you thought it should work. What sucked, though, is if you were that person's manager and you had to approve their timesheets, there were like secret knobs and 3 different handshakes that you had to do, and the settings had to be all just perfect, and it was so prone to losing the user somewhere in this labyrinth of mid-90s, whatever. But everyone knew that if you got into a problem like that, you would search Confluence to find some docs. And so we start this doc with, if you're here, it's probably not you. Here's a picture, here's a GIF of a baby monkey. Please look at it for as long as you need to, because it's not your fault. And then we step through, like, here are the screenshots, here are the secret handshakes, here are the knobs and the levers and the fiddly bits. And so let people know that it's not them. If they feel bad about themselves for using your tool, they're going to avoid using your tool. Hooray, you launched it! We're good now, right? Everyone can go home. Again, who's launched something and then just like 6 months later, no one's using it? We're all human. We're busy. We got stuff to do. This is a commitment. This is a picture of a puppy wedding. You got to keep that stuff alive. It's not just, ship it and release. So how can you keep showing improvements? Wait, let's just go to this one. Cool. Here we are. We love the DevOps. DevOps involves a lot of iteration. And the great thing about iteration is it's also a reminder. When you launch V1 and everyone's like, cool, yeah, I got stuff to do, it'll get lost. But when you follow up again and say, hey, we launched that thing, remember? You're like, oh, fuck. Heck. We also heard feedback that you want to, like, something was hard, and so we fixed it. That's like another shiny little bow that you get to put on top of that. And it also tells people that you care and you are going to pay attention to this and you care about their experience and are working to optimize their experience. Iteration is so good at keeping a change alive because it acts as a reminder. Same thing with metrics. If you say, we were aiming to improve quality or speed or whatever by foo %, and you can say, look, it's going up into the... It's going up. They go, oh crap, I want to be part of the good team. They're going up and to the right. Like, I should do that. Follow-up checks. If at all possible, identify who is supposed to implement this change. This is really good if you just need people to add something to the pipeline. Just go in and see if they have. If they haven't, they are either busy, they're most likely either busy, or they are scared. And the right answer for both of those problems is to offer help. Which again says, I care about you and I want you to succeed and I will help you. And they'll be like, thank you, I like you too, yay. Onboarding. New employees are a font of enthusiasm. Hack into that. If your onboarding materials for your tool, for your process, for whatever you've got, make them feel productive and useful right out of the gate when they are feeling super vulnerable but also highly volatile and full of potential, you will create a super evangelist, and they will remind the rest of their teammates and be like, oh, did you try that new thing? Wasn't it cool? Right? And use that. End-of-life support for the previous way is a great way to make people get forced onto your change if you have that ability. Yeah, I think that was... Oh, okay, so if you are into summary slides, this is the point in time where you break out your camera. So, what did we go over? We went over the ADKAR model. The ADKAR model stands for being aware of the tigers that exist in your problem space, illustrating the glorious puppies that await your audience in their future, giving varied, clear instructions at the knowledge phase, which is not at the beginning, it is in the middle, ensuring people have the ability and permissions to roll out a change and that they come across as little friction as possible, and reminders. Because we are human, if you have enjoyed this talk and would like to read more, these are 3 books that I found really useful in the space. I keep telling myself I'm going to come up with a joke that lasts exactly 10 seconds to fill in this slide. That was it. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.